are now listening to the War Report Podcast Network.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the College Loop Podcast, episode 196 of the College Loop Podcast. I am Dylan Larck at your boy Tank on Twitter, and I am here to rank my top 10 Auburn quarterbacks of all time. It's been a very dead news week starting off thus far. No Auburn sports to talk about until, of course, the Wednesday show. We'll be previewing Auburn baseball and Auburn softball as they continue their SEC conference play. Auburn softball getting ready to wrap up their regular season against Alabama. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and shout myself out. Got a new thumbnail going on for the show, so let me know how you feel about the thumbnail. Also got a brand new outro at the end of the video, so don't forget to show some love for the new things going on at the College Loop. Got some new announcements coming up very soon. But before we get into that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with one tiny little news tidbit. After we got done with the live stream from Sunday, actually got announced that Zion Puckett did get invited to a mini camp to the New York Jets. So a huge shout out to Zion Puckett for getting his chance in the league. It now makes, I believe, 10 total Tigers that are getting a shot in the NFL. 5 got drafted, 5 got signed. It's going to be a lot of fun to kind of track how they play and how they stack up in the NFL for the pro game. But with that, let's get right into my top 10 list of Auburn quarterbacks all time, starting out with a bit of an older quarterback. And of course, if I miss any guys, let me know. I am 24 years old. So I have some recency bias going on. I didn't see a lot of the guys play. There are very few quarterbacks that I hold in high regard that I did get to watch play, but I do think a lot of – I say that like half this list probably isn't a few of those guys. But starting off, Lloyd Nix is my number 10 quarterback for Auburn and Auburn football history. He brought Auburn their first SEC title in 1957. His stats don't really stand out too much, but he was a running back, switched over to the quarterback position. His stats in his career, he had 666 yards rushing on 5 touchdowns. Also had lost my place. 8 touchdowns, passing to 14 interceptions, but had 1,239 yards passing. Different era back in the day, but did win the SEC in 1957, and of course that first national championship. So Lloyd Nix going to be a little bit of a respectable question or respectable placement, just to respect the past, because he did bring Auburn to the first national championship. And a couple of guys I had on the outside looking in, Patrick Nix, Jeff Beard, were 2 of the guys that I had kind of battling out with Lloyd. But of course, the national championship kind of holds him over that spot. And then going on to my next guy, this guy is actually the first quarterback I ever remembered watching play. That's going to be Brandon Cox. Brandon Cox played at Auburn from 2004 to 2007, where he is actually currently fourth all time in career passing yards, and he is currently third in all time touchdowns for the Auburn Tigers. I hold Brandon Cox in a very high regard because he was that first quarterback right after the Jason Campbell era. More on him in a second. Actually, later on. Brandon Cox was that first guy that I remember actually playing. I remember watching Brandon Cox. I was very excited. And I remember after Brandon Cox left, it was the Chris Todd era, which Chris Todd, another great quarterback, who after it kind of got – I think a lot of people forget about Chris Todd because he was sandwiched between, Jason Campbell and then Brandon Cox. And then, of course, right after Chris Todd was Cam Newton. So a lot of people forget about Chris Todd. And I just have this vague memory of Auburn playing. And I guess at this time it would have been like 8. I remember Chris Todd, I think, threw an interception. And Auburn was winning the game. But I remember looking at my dad, and I was like, I miss Brandon Cox. And looking back, I definitely understand why. Brandon Cox had 6,959 passing yards to 42 touchdowns, had a lot of interceptions, but was a very, very good passing quarterback. Had 3 consecutive 2,000-yard passing seasons, which at this rate, very rare for Auburn Tiger quarterbacks. Auburn has not seen a 2,000-yard passer in a very long time. I do think that the last person to do that might have been Bo Nix. I could be very wrong about that. I don't think TJ Finley ever hit that. And I'm going to actually check myself before I sound like an absolute buffoon right in front of a mic. So let me see. TJ Finley did not hit 2,000 yards for Auburn in 2022 or 2021. Robbie Ashford hit 1,600. And just tracking myself because I'm going to swear I'm going to look stupid. Peyton Thorne was 255 short. So Bo Nix in 2021 was the last Tiger to hit 2,000 yards passing. Sorry, I had to check myself there. But yeah, Brady Cox, definitely a guy who I still hold in very high regard because he, again, first guy I remember watching play quarterback. Now to go on my number 8 guy. Many people know and love Mr. Stan White. I currently have my number 8 quarterback all the time. He is the all-time leader in passing yards for the Tigers. Never had a season under 1,700 passing yards, had 40 touchdowns, also had a lot of interceptions, but played from 1990 to 1993, was a part of that undefeated 1993 season, which is his second best passing yards season, but not really a dual-threat guy, but did have 11 touchdowns. Very, very good quarterback, a very good radio personality as well for Stan White. A guy, again, this is one of the guys I didn't get to watch play, but I have to go on what I've watched and what I've seen. Stan White was a very good quarterback for Auburn, and that's why he's still. It's not particularly close. Currently, he holds a 700-yard lead over everyone else, right in front of Jason Campbell and another guy I'm about to talk about in a second. But yeah, Stan White, great quarterback for Auburn. A guy gets held in very high regard. I did lead Auburn to the 1993 SEC championship season, one that should have resulted in a national championship, but of course the NCAA regulations were broken, and of course, why not just go ahead and let Auburn claim it? What's stopping us? There's not a champion that year that matters. Just let Auburn get that 1993 ring. So, yeah, Stan White, have my number 8 overall quarterback. This one, I will say, my number 7 guy, going to go ahead and prelude this with the fact that I might get some slack for my pick here, but my number 7 quarterback all time for the Auburn Tigers is one Bo Nix. SEC Freshman of the Year in 2019. Bo Nix was a very, very solid quarterback for Auburn throughout the 3 years that he was here. Never had a season under 2,200 yards passing, and that's strictly because he got hurt. I would probably be saying never had a season under 2,400 yards if he didn't get hurt. Had a lot of interceptions at Auburn, had 16 over 3 years, but also had 39 touchdowns, developing well over the years. I mean, that 2021 season, I was holding Bo Nix as a top 5 caliber quarterback for Auburn all the time. I would have put him over Jarrett Stidham at that point. And of course, everyone knows how I feel about Jarrett Stidham. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks Auburn has seen. But Bo Nix was a awesome quarterback for Auburn when he was healthy. And if he just had the development, if he just had the weapons, if he just had the backing of the fan base, Bo Nix would have finished his career out at Auburn and would have developed into one of the greatest of all time that Auburn's ever seen. I mean, he's not going to beat some of the Heisman winners, or you never know exactly what he figured out. But Bo Nix went to Oregon after his 3 years at Auburn and turned into one of the top quarterbacks in the country. I mean, last year for Oregon, he had 45 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. 3 interceptions. That is a 9-to-1 touchdown interception ratio that Bo Nix had while he was away from Auburn. And I know a lot of people like to blame him for things that went wrong with the offense in those years, but people forget to mention his last year at Auburn when he was dealing with injuries. He had 11 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. He was improving at a higher rate, and who knows what would have happened had he stayed. I mean, if he had stayed healthy in 2021, Auburn might have beaten Alabama in the Iron Bowl, and we sadly would have had to watch another couple of seasons of Brian Harsin because he would have gotten an extension. But if Bo Nix had just had the backing of the fans that he deserved at that point, he was the starting quarterback, and I will never forgive anyone or everyone that was on the bench Bo let TJ throw train. If you ever said that unironically, I do hope that both sides of your pillow are warm tonight. I do hope that all of your socks have a hole in the toe. That's how I feel about anyone who said that unironically. Yeah, Bo Nix, definite top 10. And right now I have him at 7. Who knows how I'll feel in a few years, but Bo Nix, I'm going to claim him in the NFL. I feel like all the fans who backed Bo throughout his entire tenure at Auburn deserve the chance to be able to claim him, because had the other side of the fan base actually supported Bo Nix, we might have been claiming our own NFL quarterback. So with that, moving on to number 6, I have Damian Craig, the quarterback from 1994 and 1997, followed the Stan White era. Damian Craig had a very solid career as a dual threat quarterback and had a steady growth. And I say he's a starting quarterback. He was not a starting quarterback until his junior and senior year, 96 and 97. Had very solid years. So in 1996, had 2,200 yards passing to 16 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. In 1997, had 3,200 yards to 18 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. Also had 19 touchdowns on the ground throughout his career. With sacks count as rushing yards. So he had 0 rushing yards on 96 attempts in his senior season. But Damian Craig, a guy who's gotten a lot of hype now that he is a very awesome wide receivers coach, one that Auburn fans everywhere wish that they have hired every single time that he is available. I just don't think there's enough connection there for coaching wise for Damian Craig to come back to the Plains. But one of Auburn's first modern era looking quarterbacks, and Damian Craig, a guy who can make any throw, and is also a dual threat. You got to watch out for his legs. And that kind of goes into the upcoming seasons where in just a few more years, you get guys like Jason Campbell. And you kind of see that transition to Auburn having a more mobile quarterback system, and Damian Craig starts that. I know you had Lloyd Nix in the 50s, but that was a running back turned quarterback situation. And now you're finally seeing a true dual threat in an Auburn uniform. And I will say, I'll pull up the Damian Craig thing one time. Those jerseys are what make Auburn have the best home jerseys in the country. If they bring back the orange drop shadow, I am starting a petition for the drop shadow to come back. Please, Nike. It'd be the best thing ever if you did bring that back. I know there's a lot of people out there that really hate tradition or really love tradition and refuse to let Auburn change uniforms. But if you bring back the drop shadow, technically that is tradition. Technically, orange jerseys were kind of tradition too because Auburn's worn them before. So, throwback uniforms are traditional. So why not? Bring back the drop shadow is all I'm saying. That Auburn's home jersey is a little bit bland. I love the away jerseys more than anything. But the home jerseys need a little something. And the drop shadow would be perfect. But yeah, Damian Craig currently have my number 6 overall spot. Now coming in number 5, and before I get to number 5, I'm going to go ahead and let y'all know. Thank you all for tuning in to the College Loop Podcast. It's going to be a bit of a shorter episode because there's not a lot going on again. But of course, if you're listening in to my top 10 list, go ahead and drop a like. Leave your thoughts on what you think of the list thus far. And of course, later on, let me know what you think of the list overall. But of course, make sure to follow us everywhere else. And of course, if you're looking for anything else to support the show, you got merch available. You got the Feeling Loopy t-shirts that are available for $25 on the warpourshop.com. Go check it out, or the warpour.com. Go to the shop. It's right there, right on the second page, because right now I don't have a graphic for it yet. There is currently there's a College Loop hat on sale on the Warpour shop as we speak for $25. Believe me, the graphics will be ready for the Thursday show. I'll have a whole spiel for it. And believe me, the hat is gorgeous. It comes in 4 colorways. It comes in black, navy, pink, and khaki. It's beautiful. It's got the College Loop logo in the front. It's got the War Report Podcast Network on the side. It's a beautiful hat. Cannot recommend anymore. And I'll have a full review whenever I get it, because believe me, as soon as it went up, I was like, that's mine. And I got it, and it looks gorgeous. And with that, back to the list. So number 5, I have Jarrett Stidham as my number 5 quarterback all time for the Auburn Tigers. Jarrett Stidham, the last true Auburn quarterback that Auburn fans can claim to have produced for the NFL. Jarrett Stidham, a former Baylor commit who transferred to Auburn for his sophomore and junior year. Auburn's last 3,000-yard passer, where in 2017 he was one of the top quarterbacks in the SEC, throwing for 3,158 yards, 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and then had a little bit of a regression passing yards wise, but like ratio wise, a better season. So 2018, 2,700 yards passing, 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. And then going into his rushing stats, had 7 total touchdowns for the Tigers. Never really got asked to be a dual threat. Let me say, Jarrett Stidham might have been the best pure passing quarterback that I have ever seen in my fandom of the Tigers. And I said that knowing that I hadn't seen all of Stan White. I didn't see all of Brandon Cox, but they both had 4 years to work with at Auburn that Jarrett Stidham didn't have. And Jarrett Stidham currently stands at number 7 all time for the Tigers in passing yards, and had, give him another year where he could have gotten like another 2,700 yards passing. That would have shot him up to the 9, like right above Stan White. Had he started his career at Auburn, he would have broken that record just by himself alone. But Jarrett Stidham, one of my favorite quarterbacks I've ever got a chance to watch play. I will never not sing the praises of what Jarrett Stidham brought to the Tigers in 2017 and 2018. And this is another one of those, like, people, I remember my first year in college was the last year of the Jarrett Stidham era. And I think this was like the year that Jarrett like regressed, and everyone was like blaming Jarrett Stidham whenever the offensive line was worse and the weapons weren't really helping out. And people were saying to bench Jarrett Stidham and start Malik Willis. Well, Malik Willis did pan out for Liberty, would not have panned out for Auburn. We saw that on the field, but people do not know ball. It is fine. It's fine. Not everyone can understand that Jarrett Stidham is a top 5 quarterback all time for the Tigers. And then going in at number 4, got some of the heavy hitters left. Got Nick Marshall coming in at my number 4 spot. Played 2 seasons at the Tigers after switching from the defensive side of the ball at JUCO level. Started his career off at Georgia. And then, of course, came to Auburn in the first year of the Gus Malzahn era and absolutely blew the roof off of defenses. For the Tigers, had 4,500 yards passing, 34 touchdowns, 13 interceptions in his career, and then rushing yards wise, 1,800 yards rushing in his career, 23 touchdowns. And of course, you cannot forget that miraculous 2013 year. Finishes out with a 2013 SEC championship, runner-up in the BCS championship. Still one of the most heartbreaking games I've ever watched in my entire life. And you cannot forget that in 2014, the level of play that Nick Marshall stepped up to as a passer, a former defensive back stepping up as a passer is absolutely ridiculous. Especially from a guy like Nick Marshall, who was truly a running threat first, and especially in the read option, fast-paced, up-tempo Gus Malzahn offense of 2013. And then he kind of took a step back rushing-wise and picked it up in the passing game. And it was something that was really fun to see, because this was like the early stages of Gus Malzahn being a true offensive genius, and saw what he would do with Nick Marshall. Nick Marshall is probably the second most fun quarterback that Auburn has ever got the chance to watch. And I say that getting ready to talk about a guy in a little bit, but Nick Marshall is just the epitome of what was so fun about the Gus Malzahn era. And of course, looking back, he was probably the only quarterback who actually got better in another year under Gus Malzahn. I mean, you talk about people saying like Jarrett Stidham regressed a little bit passing yards wise. Jeremy Johnson never really panned out. Sean White, injury prone. So really, I guess Bo Nix might have been another one, but I wouldn't really say that with COVID because he had less games to work with. But Nick Marshall, really the first quarterback, and the last quarterback that we got to see as Gus Malzahn, the Auburn coach, that really progressed as a passer. So Nick Marshall, my number 4 quarterback all time for the Auburn Tigers. Coming in at my number 30 spot, I have Jason Campbell from 2001 to 2004, Jason Campbell was the starting quarterback for the Auburn Tigers, and of course led Auburn to that glorious 2004 undefeated season, that first true season of where every Auburn fan got to feel the pain of that BCS championship snub. Had Auburn gotten in, who knows what would have happened, but with Jason Campbell, with Cadillac, with Ronnie, with Ben Abamano, with Craig, with Devin Aromashadu, with that entire defense, with Carlos Dansby and Carlos Rogers being up there. And of course, I'm not saying a lot of other guys off the top of my head right now. Jason Campbell was a guy that Auburn fans got to watch really grow as a Tiger. And looking at his career, his freshman year had 1,100 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. 02 had 1,200 yards passing, 11 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Then junior year, 2,200 yards, 10 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. And then his senior year, 2,700 yards passing, 20 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, finished 7th in the Heisman voting. Who knows how the Auburn team would have panned out if they had gotten the chance to play USC in the national championship. And Jason Campbell, one of the goats that Auburn's got to see at the quarterback position, and truly just one of the greatest guys all around. Glad to see that he is on the call with Andy Bertram for football games. He's a lot of fun to listen to. But yeah, Jason Campbell. I wish. So I became a fan during the time of Jason Campbell. Like my first game was 04, the Citadel. But as a 4-year-old, you don't really remember the game that well. So that's when I first get conscious as an Auburn fan was Brandon Cox. But I do hate that I actually got to miss the Jason Campbell 04 year. But yeah, Jason Campbell currently stands as my number 3 quarterback all time for the Auburn Tigers. And coming in my number 2 spot, you probably already guessed who it's going to be. It's going to be Pat Sullivan, Auburn's first ever Heisman winner, the Heisman winner of 1971. Also finished 6th in the Heisman voting in 1970. And Pat Sullivan currently stands as the number 5 quarterback all time in passing yards and has 53 touchdowns, 39 interceptions. One of the top players of his era and one of the top quarterbacks of the 70s. Pat Sullivan was it was the first time Auburn got to see a true quarterback. I mean, you got to see Lloyd Nix, and he was a good quarterback, but he was a running back first. He was a runner first. Pat Sullivan came in and was just and also a true dual threat in that case. I'm sorry, I'd say pure passer, a dual threat guy. In his Heisman year, he only had 2 touchdowns on the ground, but had 2,000 yards passing, 20 touchdowns to 11 interceptions. His junior year, 270 yards rushing, 9 touchdowns on the ground to 2,500 yards passing, 17 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. And he's just a great quarterback. First time Auburn has seen a true quarterback that has been that good. That's what I meant to say earlier. So a lot of fun looking back at the highlights of Pat Sullivan. He is just an all-time great. He is on the Auburn Mount Rushmore of players in general for the Auburn football team. And, he's got the statue. So Pat Sullivan, my number 2 quarterback all time for the Auburn Tigers. And coming in number 1, you already knew who it was going to be. It's Robbie Ashford, my number 1 quarterback all time for the Auburn Tigers. And of course, I am completely joking. I just got to let y'all know Robbie Ashford hype train still there. Hopefully he starts for South Carolina, but I don't know yet. But of course, my real number 1 is, of course, Cameron Jarrell Newton, the greatest quarterback in college football history, the greatest quarterback in Auburn football history. I'm wearing his jersey. If you didn't already know, I was wearing his jersey. I'm sorry for everyone who didn't. If you're listening to the audio version of the show, I am wearing the Cam Newton number 2 jersey. It was going to happen. Everyone knows it's Cam Newton. Cam Newton, of course, 2010 Heisman winner, 2010 national champion, 2010 SEC champion. And I go and list all the awards. AP Player of the Year, Consensus All-American, Davey O'Brien Award, Manning Award winner, Maxwell Award winner, SEC Offensive Player of the Year winner, Walter Camp Player of the Year winner. I could list so many stories about Cam Newton. He is the greatest player I have ever had the opportunity to watch play. And I'm glazing, I know. But Cam Newton earns that right. And his lone year with the Tigers had 28 yards, 2,800 yards passing, 30 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, and also combine that with 1,400 yards rushing, 20 touchdowns. Also had 2 catches for 42 yards and a awesome touchdown against Ole Miss. And one of my first memories of Cam Newton that year was in that first game. I believe it was against Washington State. I remember my family was at the beach that year, and I watched Cam Newton just kind of make plays all over the place. And I ran outside of my dad, who's on the grill, and I was like, this Cam Newton guy is legit. And I watched Arkansas State. So Arkansas State was the first game. There we go. I was like, Dad, this Cam Newton guy is legit. And I will stand by. That's exactly what I said. And then it just kind of goes on. The legend of Cam Newton went on through that year. And it is just awesome to see how that season kind of started off as this team wasn't going to be that good. And then all of a sudden it was, whoa, what's going on? Because I remember like I went to the Chattanooga game and I got to high five Cam Newton in the Tiger Walk. And I was like, I literally looked at my dad and said, no, I'm never washing this hand again. He high fived this hand and I was never going to wash it again until I went to the bathroom and had to wash it. But just everything that went on, the drama that followed, the Iron Bowl is probably my all-time favorite Iron Bowl I ever got to watch, just because of what I got to do afterwards. And of course, the 2013 one, I guess, would actually be my number one Iron Bowl. But so story time for this 2010 Iron Bowl. My brother, who is an Alabama fan, calls me at halftime asking me, the scam Newton, that where's your Heisman? Where's your Heisman winner at? And then, of course, Auburn was down 24-7. And if you've seen this game before or you've heard about it, you know how this game turns out. Auburn turns it around in the second half, wins 28-27. I called my brother back and I said, there's our Heisman winner. There he is. And then he didn't say a word and hung up. So all of it to say, Cam Newton is my number one all-time quarterback of all time for the Auburn Tigers. So, of course, leave your list. Of course, this is my list right now. So if you need a refresher, Lloyd Nix, Brandon Cox, Dan White, Bo Nix, Damian Craig, Jarrett Stidham, Nick Marshall, Jason Campbell, Pat Sullivan, Cam Newton. If you have your own list, leave it in the comment section below, or, of course, leave it in the stream or tweet at us. We appreciate every time y'all tweet out your own takes at us. But here is that list yet again. And, of course, if you're looking for me anywhere else, you can find me on Twitter at your boy Tang. It's just right there. If you want to say I'm stupid, you can just tweet at me right there. Say I'm wrong. Say whatever you want to say. Just keep PG. Why not? But of course, again, if I left someone off that you think I should have kept on, just let me know. I didn't get to watch all however many quarterbacks Auburn has had in history of their team. I mean, if I look at the record, I mean, there's 144 players who threw a pass for the Tigers. Running backs, tight ends, wide receivers, kickers galore. All those guys who, I don't know, could have an argument of some sort. But of course, if you are wanting to support the show, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, because we're going to go ahead and get out of here. So leave your top 10 Auburn quarterbacks of all time, and let me know if you want me to continue this and do top 10 running backs, top 10 wide receivers, continuing on and on throughout the positions. I'll do top 10 kickers if you want me to. But of course, I'm Dylan Larck, @boytang on Twitter. Also follow me on Instagram as well at Dylan Larck at DYLENLERCK. And of course, right here on the College Elite Podcast, we should like, comment, and subscribe. Leave your thoughts on my list. And of course, follow us everywhere else on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, the works. All this at the College Loop. Also going to be the audio version of the show as well on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and of course, Amazon Music. And of course, all that being said, thank you all for tuning in to the College Loop Podcast, War Eagle, and thank y'all for tuning in.